Hey everybody, I'm Adrian. I'm an alcoholic. Thanks for the introduction, B. And good to see some people that I've recognized virtually. Uh, let's get down to it. So I was and am an alumni of Pavillon, and am a grateful sober alcoholic. I have a sobriety date, and it's July 17th, 2020. So I celebrated 3 years this past summer. Let me start from the beginning and hopefully y'all can relate to some of this and get something out of it. So I grew up in rural Mississippi, middle of nowhere in the Mississippi Delta, 10 miles from the nearest town of about 1,000 people, and grew up in an alcoholic family. I had an alcoholic father. It was sort of an erratic, chaotic, uh, abusive, unhappy environment. Mean, I try not to say other people are alcoholics. My dad drank a handle of vodka a day for as long as I can remember, so probably has an issue. I'm not sure. Um, and just to give you an idea of the overall culture that we grew up there, it was a lot of drugs and alcohol, and it was a little crazy. I mean, I remember a family friend came home and is hearing the story that he didn't like what his wife had cooked, so he drained his revolver into the oven, and the story was, or people said, "Oh, was he drinking?" "Oh, yeah, John was drinking." Everybody sort of shook it off and said, "Oh, okay." And it's just that was sort of acceptable behavior, and that's what I thought was normal. Um, but I can tell you for me, from as early as I can remember, I just remember feeling different than other people and just sort of not good enough. I have distinct memories of that going back certainly till I was 6, 7, 8, 9 years old. Um, Very strict religious household, and I had trouble reconciling that because what I grew up with, my parents' God, which was one that was vengeful and very super strict, and if you didn't follow this set of rules, you were damned. And as far as I could tell, my family certainly didn't follow those. So it really confused me, and I just thought I was screwed because I never could achieve that level of perfection. I'm a bit of a late bloomer when it comes to alcohol. I didn't have my first drink till I was 15, and that's probably because I didn't know what I was missing out. Um, I starting around age 9, I was a miserable, unhappy kid because I felt just full of fear and different than everybody. And my parents started taking me to a lot of psychiatrists, and they had threats against me that if I didn't get start up acting right and be normal, then they were going to hospitalize me. So I learned how to pretend at that very early age, and they also started me on some heavy sedatives too, which probably was my alcohol surrogate for a while. But all I'd say, fast forward age 15, I had my first drink. It was a cold Coors Light at the end of a day working on the farm with the other farm workers, and to paraphrase my sponsor, the grass got a little greener and the sky got a little bluer. Uh, my shoulders rolled back and I could look people in the eye, and I said, "Well, I thought this was bad. This was supposed to send me straight to hell, but this is good stuff. I feel great. I want more of this." And that one beer I had, that was the end of my social drinking. The next time I drank, I got a 12 pack of beer and did my best to drink all of it. Came in 12 packs. I thought that was, and I had enough money to buy it. That's how much I thought was, standard. And looking back on that sort of second experience with alcohol, I began a pattern that I would have for a while in my life until I got sober. And the next morning, I woke up, didn't know where the hell I was, what had happened, and felt terribly sick. And I also shortly thereafter said, "Well, I'm never going to do that again." And that lasted about 2 or 3 days. And then the euphoric recall and the desire to drink and feel the way that I did initially um, overtook me. So with that, I was a certainly a weekend drinker throughout the rest of high school, and sometimes a week-a-day drinker. And I'd had a few run-ins with the law, but managed to skirt it, mainly because I think of how small the community was and how everybody knew everybody. I mean, we got pulled over all drunk one evening with loaded assault rifles, and we were all under 18, but the daughter of the police chief was with us, so we got off that evening. But the police had every right to lock us up there. Looking back, and that was just one of many run-ins with the police that I had. That uh, my higher power was looking out for me. I managed to not accrue a record somehow. I was blessed with a good many academic gifts and was able to get a scholarship into an Ivy League university out of rural Mississippi, and I went to the University of Pennsylvania after I graduated high school. Uh, One of the reasons I picked that is I was trying to get as far away from my family as I could. I figured I could start anew, and I had my first sort of geographic cure, if you will. I was miserable, and I figured moving somewhere else would make me happier. Um, about 2 or 3 weeks in, one weekend, I'd been out drinking, of course, and I got a little sick, and so I had to visit the bushes. And then I lost my balance and fell. And the next thing I know, I'd woken up in the hospital the next day with staples all in the back of my head. I'd had a skull fracture, and they told me I had a blood alcohol of 320. Here I was, 18, and just looking back, it's a miracle I didn't die. Um, and I'd laugh that off. They sent me to some sort of alcohol counseling for a few weeks, and they asked how much I drank, and they had these boxes that was like 1 to 2 or 2 to 4 or something like that. And then there was like the greater than 10 was on the extreme. And I was like, in a sitting, I was like, well, that's going to make me seem like an alcoholic if I check that. So I'm not going to check that one. But this really doesn't go up near enough, high enough for me. So, I had some consequences there, but I thought it was just a funny story to tell other people. But it certainly was a harbinger of things to come. I did pretty well in college. I managed to be able to lock down my studies when I had to, at least initially. Uh, my freshman year, I joined a fraternity as well, and that was like adding gasoline to a fire because then I had endless supply of alcohol and other substances, and that caught up with me my sophomore year, and I was failing out of college just because I couldn't stay sober. I was daily uh, user of some, I was either smoking weed or using stimulants or drinking every day, and it's really hard to pass classes when you're doing that. So I had to take some time off during my sophomore year, and I felt so worthless. I was on spring break, and I had I went to spring break because I pulled out of school the week before I was supposed to go down to Mexico for spring break, and I just went because I'd already laid out the money. And I remember drinking and drinking there and just feeling so miserable, and I couldn't just shut off that constant narrative of worthlessness in my head. And I made my first attempt on my life at that point with an overdose. I made a solid attempt. I'm I'm going to get to this point, but I'm a physician. I'm a ICU doctor, and I felt pretty confident at the time that what my methods would have worked had I not been rescued by a friend. Um, and I survived that, and re-enrolled in school and finished up, and that's okay. I mean, the other notable, that's not that particularly interesting or outstanding. The other sort of thing there was that may be of interest is I got into to needing money to support my habits. And I had a job working in an optical shop selling glasses, but I found a much more lucrative job in pharmaceutical sales. The problem was they were unlicensed pharmaceutical sales, and that all that money went to supporting my own habits. Fortunately, I managed to skirt any consequences from that and get out of it. I had a friend, a good friend, who was sort of my partner in crime, and 2 years after he graduated college, he took his own life related to addiction, and that was a horrible blow. He jumped off a eighth story of a parking garage in Atlantic City, and it's all over the news. It was really it was devastating. But fast forwarding, I've managed to get into med school. I don't know, it's just by the grace of God. Went back to Mississippi for medical school. I really enjoyed that. And it made me feel like I was worth something. I could go to work and was respected and would feel like I had, meaning. And so I drank a lot less. I definitely did have some workaholism then, and really threw myself into my studies and work. Met a woman and got married. Um, and then, you know, graduated and I came to North Carolina where I live now. I live in Durham and had been here since 2010 to complete my training. So, in my early career as a full fledged physician, I still managed to keep my drinking locked down. But a lot of my character defects that I've worked on in sobriety were showing through. I mean, I was a jackass, and I still will be if I'm not careful. Mainly because if other people were scared of me, I had the upper hand, and I could feel better than them, and so it just wasn't a kind person. Um, but I felt good. I put my coat on and go to work, and I felt good at work. I felt like I was worth something, and that just was so contrary to how I um, felt normally. I would feel empty otherwise. Uh, Fast forwarding a little bit to 2016. This is 6 years there where I managed to keep my drinking mostly in check, just doing some binge drinking. Um, and cut out the other substances mainly because I was getting drug tested and I didn't want to get in trouble. Um, then my wife was pregnant in 2016. Oh, excuse me. And we'd had a big baby shower one day. It was on a Sunday. And I got up that Sunday morning and I started drinking whiskey at about 9 o'clock. And that wasn't any different than any other Sunday morning that I didn't have to work. But there was a party there, so there was people to drink with, so I had a good excuse. And I was drinking the higher shelf stuff. That was really the only difference than any other day. Uh, so I was good and loaded that afternoon when the party broke up, and uh, my dog just wasn't acting right, and she was like a child. I mean, had this big 100-pound lab mix that was, you know, beloved dog, and took her to the emergency vet, and they told me that she had acute leukemia and she might not live through the night. And so took my dog back home and thought she was going to die that evening. Then we got back as we were sitting there. My wife said, "Oh, I think my water just broke," and she's 32 weeks pregnant, so she's a good many weeks early still. Uh, but that was the truth, and so 3 hours later, we had a child, and we had a child in the NICU in the neonatal ICU, uh, and I could barely stand. I was so intoxicated, and I was just, I'd been telling myself that I was going to sober up when my daughter was born. I wasn't going to be like my own dad. Uh, I wasn't going to do that. I was going to break this multi-generational cycle of alcoholism and just chaos and abuse. And um, there I was, and I stayed drunk pretty much the whole month she was in the ICU. I just couldn't bear it. Yeah. Fortunately, she turns 7 in a few weeks, and she's a happy, healthy child, which is truly a blessing. So things definitely progressed over the next, I'd say, 2016 to 2019, and I went to an almost daily drinker, and I would do stuff that I'm ashamed of now. Like I would my daughter would go down for a nap, and I'd leave her at home to by herself to go run to the liquor store to get more booze. And if I had a particularly bad hangover in the morning, I'd have to have a little nip to get me through the day. So I knew I had a problem. For at least the year leading into the getting to recovery, I knew I had a problem with alcohol, and I couldn't stop. But what I didn't know is there was an alternate other than death. I thought I was just going to drink, I was going to continue to drink, and I was going to die from it. I was fucked, and I didn't know what to do. I remember I counted this up when I was at Pavilion. I'd seen 17 counselors or psychiatrists since I was 9 years old. And I was seeing one who in late 2019 who referred me to a alcohol like specialist. And I remember talking to this woman. She asked me a bunch of questions, and I was mostly honest this time. I was the most honest I'd been with anybody about my substance use. I wasn't entirely honest, but I was certainly more honest about how much I drank and used to than I'd been with anybody else. And she said, "It sounds like you're probably an alcoholic, and you for you moderate drinking won't work. You probably just need to be abstinent altogether." And that scared me because I didn't know what to do without drugs and alcohol. Because that booze made the voices in my head, the negative narrative, uh, shut up for a little while. It had reached the point where I no longer felt good, but I just didn't feel miserable anymore when I was drinking or smoking pot or taking opiates, whatever I could get my hands on. Uh, so I am an intensive care doctor. I'm a pulmonary intensive care doctor. So early 2020, my life got hectic because as pandemic started, and we started seeing the first deaths in my in our unit. In fact, not the first, but I missed this infamy by less than 24 hours. One of the first patients that died in the state of North Carolina was somebody I was caring for from COVID. And we'd had a press release because we knew this person wasn't going to survive, and it was only a matter of time, and didn't want to beat the note. I was terrified of having the notoriety of being the person to care for the first COVID death in the state. But that didn't happen. Um, but gosh, I was so terrified. I was physically in terrible shape. I'd gained about 80 pounds over 2 years, over 3 years. I wasn't eating anymore. I was getting all my calories from alcohol. And I was managing to somehow still go to work. But as soon as I would get in my car at the end of the day, I'd get a hot bottle of vodka, a hot cup of vodka, and just start drinking it straight. Um, and do that until I pass out and get up and do it again. And just to give you an idea of the insanity, the I was caring for somebody who was dying of alcoholic liver disease, and alcoholics and drug addicts that die in active addiction It's not the peaceful situation that we see on the Hallmark Channel with the family around. It's violent. It's it's usually alone, or frequently alone, and it's sad. And I was caring for this guy who was in that shape, and I remember before I had to go in to acutely deal with something, I had to stop at the bathroom and vomit because I was just so hungover that day. And as soon as I left, the first thing I did was start drinking. And I was sitting there going, I'm going to be this guy in the next year or two. And there's nothing I can do about it. I just felt so overwhelmingly screwed. Um, Fast forward a little bit, that continued. My marriage had been, as an aside, not great really ever since we got married. We'd been married for a decade, but it wasn't necessarily a happy marriage by any means. Uh, Large part of that is on me for sure. But I came home from work one day, and my wife and child, I was expecting them home, and it had gotten late, and sort of an hour after they normally get home, and I called, and turns out this is on July 14th, 2020. She had cleaned out my bank account, cleaned out their stuff, and left, and canceled all the credit cards, and said that she didn't want anything to do with me anymore. She was taking the child. Um, Gosh, I was devastated, and I decided that I was just going to take my own life that evening. I really didn't have anything to live for in my mind. Um, and I found out she also took taken all my firearms, which probably did save my life. But I had an alternate plan. Um, and I called a couple of people to tell them goodbye. And the second one I called, I think he's been a long term friend. He knew something was up because he kept me on the phone for hours. And he told me something that he said, if you'll let it, this will be the worst night of your life. And it doesn't have to get any worse than this. And that was really a godsend. And the next day, um, I was defeated, completely broken. And I called the North Carolina PHP, which is the Physicians Health Program. It's a program to help physicians and healthcare providers, and said, with addiction issues. And so, what do I do? And they said, well, you need to go to a treatment center. And I said, well, okay. And they gave me a list of like 15 ones. Pavillon was on there. And I said, between you and me, which one would you recommend? They said, well, I'd recommend that. They gave two recommendations. Pavillon was one of them. And that was the closer one. So I went with Pavillon, and called them up. And 2 days later, I was there. The day I drove over there, I had my last drink. It was a warm, some sort of terrible wheat beer. And haven't had a drink or any drugs since then. But I showed up, they had to detox me at Pavilion. Gosh, I was cooking. And, being the smart physician, I didn't want any of the drugs to help me because I take drugs. Outrageous. But that lasted for a few hours. Then I was like, yes, please give them to me because in the previous 6 or 8 months, anytime I had gone for more than a day without drinking, I would begin to have these really vivid dreams. Others would call them hallucinations. And then my heart would feel like it's beat out of his chest. I was having, DTS, horrible withdrawals, which can be life threatening. And so I was grateful. I got detox there, and then I went into sort of the I don't know what they call it. You have EC and general treatment, I guess, but into the standard treatment area. And I walked in, and I was so full of self-loathing, but still an ego, you know, that's massive. And I was like, these people don't know how important I am. I was thinking, my job, they're surely going to miss me. I'm an important person. There's a pandemic going on. They need me. They didn't. Yeah, I wasn't that important. And I fit right in there. I needed to be exactly where I was. Um, some things I learned in the first few weeks of Pavilion. Um, one is I'd learned a little bit about AA. So I hadn't didn't know the first thing about AA. I knew one person that I could think of that was in AA in my community growing up, and he seemed like a pretty good dude. Now he was an ex 1% biker that smoked 3 or 4 packs a day, had a big long beard. So that's what I thought of AA. I thought I combined that with what I saw on TV, and I thought AA was just a bunch of ex 1% bikers who sat around and smoked cigarettes, talked about how much they loved Jesus and missed drinking. And I was like, God, my life has come to this. Well, yeah, that's the way it's got to be to get my daughter back. That's the way it's got to be. Because I went to treatment to get my daughter back. Um, and I learned that wasn't the case. And I was given permission to have a God of my own understanding. Now, I'd had the God of my parents' understanding growing up. I didn't want anything to do with that God. My undergraduate degrees in religious studies and Christian history. And I'd spent a lot of time studying religions, and I really didn't want anything to do with those gods because I didn't want to. I couldn't reconcile a vengeful, hateful, hellfire and brimstone God. And I'd sort of reached the conclusion that there's probably a God out there, but I don't want anything to do with them, and they don't probably want anything to do with me. So we'll just go our separate ways. Um, but I found a different way at Pavilion, and the other thing was I heard people laugh, and heard it on Zoom meetings we were going to, and I began to laugh too. I don't remember the last time I had laughed before that. I just was devoid of joy, and gosh, that felt good just to laugh again. So with the Pavilion program, and a couple of weeks in, got some news on one Tuesday. One is, I'd gone there planning on being there for 6 weeks. And I said, I do pretty good whenever I have to do through programs, training programs. They'll probably let me out on good behavior in like 4 weeks. I'll sell right through this thing. And, the news I'd gotten instead was, you're pretty damn sick. You're probably going to need to be here for at least 3 months. Like, oh, okay. Well, I missed my daughter. That was the big hang up I had. And I just had to get over that. Uh, but also that day, uh, my wife at the time told me that I wasn't going to be welcome back in the home when I got out. And so I had no place to go back to. And that was heartbreaking. Um, and so I felt just even more unmoored then. And I'll tell you that happened to coincide with one of the days, or maybe it was the next day, that Wolf had one of his spiritual adventures, if you will. And for lack of a better way to say it, I had a spiritual awakening or experience, and I became acutely aware of a power greater than myself. And with that, I felt something that day that I hadn't felt in God knows how long. I felt a sense of overwhelming peace. And that hung around for a few hours and uh, is indescribable. Um, because I felt the feeling that alcohol gave me when I first drank, and that I felt okay with the world and with myself. Uh, and that really opened my eyes and got me serious about things. I said, "Well, I guess there is a different way." Um, I can tell you during the first few weeks there, I was still holding reservations and saying, "I'll probably just I'll beat this thing and maybe have a drink every now and again when I get out." But the longer I was at Pavilion, the more that died. And I can tell you, once I fully relinquished that and sort of surrendered that thought process, the cravings got a lot better. It took probably 6 months for my cravings to go away, but they diminished. Um, I can also say that at one point during my EC time, we were listening to like recorded speaker meetings, and we listened to a talk by Clancy I, who's a famous guy from the West Coast. He's a big AA. He founded a large group in LA and just a great speaker. And he said stuff that I could relate to that I'd never heard before. He was describing how that when alcoholics take a drink, they feel better and they want more. But that's for the 10 or 15% of us that are alcoholics. The rest of the population doesn't have that. And so that sort of blew my mind that I could experience the world different than others people and vice versa. And that was really actually reassuring and comforting. And if any, if any of you ever have a chance to listen to any of his talks, they're freely available online. I'd recommend it. He's a great speaker. Got some good recovery information. Also, while I was in treatment, I listened to my counselor, and I got a sponsor. Had a sponsor lined up for when I got out. I then go into meetings, heard somebody share their story, and really related to it. And so I asked him to be my sponsor, and got in touch with him the day I got out of Pavillon. So I got out of Pavillon in October after being there from July 20th through October 9th or 10th. And felt really overwhelmed for a variety of reasons. Pandemic was still ongoing. There weren't live meetings. Uh, and Pavilion's such a sheltered haven. It's really a safe place and it's a peaceful place. And just jumping back into the world was um, overwhelming. And the way I coped with that initially is I went to meetings. I went to a lot of meetings. Uh, within 3 or 4 hours being out of Pavillon, I had hopped on one online. The Zoom world has given us this wonderful godsend that it's easy. I mean, I'm sitting in my kitchen here or in my dining room here, and it's going to 4 or 5 meetings a day for the first few weeks. I'd been given a vacation from work for a few months, and that was really nice actually. Um, so went to meetings, met with a sponsor, did readings every day, jumped into the steps. Now, as part of EC, we had worked through the first 7 steps or so, but I redid them with my sponsor. Uh, Worked on some of my own character defects, including the egomaniac and the just sarcasm and ability to lash out at others, and realize that it's fear driven. Just I'm a scared little boy, to be honest, and prayer and acceptance, and realizing I don't have to participate in every fight I'm invited to, and I'm not that important. Uh, you know, just a person like everybody else, no better, no worse, and that's really comforting. And I try to um, some maintain that attitude. Some other things that happened. So about a month after I got out, my wife told me that she wanted a divorce. And I could tell you that during Pavilion, that had been an event that we were planning for relapse prevention. And I enacted the plan that we'd come up with, but I felt surprisingly free because it turns out the kind of person that would marry an alcoholic like me, it wasn't a very healthy relationship. So it was good to be free of that. And I have 50-50 custody of my daughter and have a wonderful, amazing daughter. Talking about daughters, I wanted to include something I learned from Oren. I'm assuming Oren still is the step speaker. Yeah, he's great. Um, he was talking about his own family and how when he got sober, he was doing it for his family. And because that really hit home. And then somebody said to him, well, what would you do if your family died? Uh, which is pretty heavy stuff. It's a not an unreasonable question. And I had to ask myself that. And my initial answer was, I guess I'd probably drink and probably die too. And so I had to shift my mindset and get sober for myself, not for anybody else. and I have to maintain it for me. So I think that allowed me to process that divorce without really, if anything, I was sort of happy about it. Um, Going ahead. So life is good. I had a healthy diet of AA. I go to multiple meetings a week. I talk to my sponsor still pretty frequently. I talked to him every day for the first few months after I got out of Pavillon, and read the big book every day. And it's like exercising. I think you have to do it when things are good, so you know what to fall back on when things aren't good, because life has ups and downs. And I know what to do when life is down, and it's usually some service work, getting my hands dirty, helping others, spending some time in prayer and meditation. And that seems to work. And it works a hell of a lot better than drinking or using any drugs. So I don't have to deal with any fallout. And I can remember what I do. It's amazing. I wake up and I'm in the same country I went to sleep in. And I can recall the previous day. It's remarkable. Who knew? Other things have happened. So I met a woman, got remarried. We're expecting a child, another child in a few weeks. And my wife's 29 weeks pregnant now, and I've been present and accounted for all of this and been supporting her. So it's just a remarkably different experience. If you had reached me 10 years ago, I would have told you that I figured I would have been dead by now. Um, and I certainly wouldn't have imagined how good life can be. I was down at the beach yesterday and had one of those moments that I have not as frequently as I'd like, but more frequently than I certainly did when I was drinking, where I just felt content. I was sitting there next to the water and felt at peace, and you know, just life was good. And gosh, I don't know. It's just blows my mind. It's remarkable. So that's my story. I am a big fan of Pavillon. It saved my life. I think I would be dead for sure if I didn't have the experience that I did. And I do what I can to hold on to my sobriety, because it's a good way to live life. It's a terrific way to live life. It boils down to this. The big book says, "Trust God, clean house, and help others," and it works for me. I want to wrap up with my favorite reading from the big book, or 12 and 12. And for those of you who are in primary, and you may not know, the 12 and 12 is a supplemental writings by the writers that wrote the big book of AA. They go through the steps and traditions in detail. And my sort of favorite piece is from page 99, is the prayer of St. Francis. I'm going to read that there, and then I'll stop talking. It says, "Lord, make me a channel of thy peace, that where there is hatred, I may bring love, that where there is wrong, I may bring the spirit of forgiveness, that where there is discord, I may bring harmony, that where there is error, I may bring truth, that where there is doubt, I may bring faith, that where there is despair, I may bring hope, that where there are shadows, I may bring light, and where there is sadness, may bring joy. Lord, grant me that I may seek rather to comfort than to be comforted, to understand than to be understood, to love than to be loved. For it is by self-forgetting that one finds, it is by forgiving that one is forgiven, it is by dying that one awakens to eternal life." Amen. Thank you.